Have you ever been in a situation where everyone around you is losing their cool? Your heart is pounding, adrenaline is pumping, and the easiest thing to do would be to just ... panic. But what if you didn't? What if, instead of letting fear take over, your brain switched into hyperdrive, analyzing every detail and calculating the perfect move? This isn't just a scene from a movie. It's the story of how one woman's incredible composure turned a life-threatening crisis into a masterclass in strategic thinking. They all thought she would break, that she would scream and cry. They couldn't have been more wrong. Our story begins on what seemed like a normal Tuesday afternoon. For our protagonist, let's call her Clara. It was just another day at the office. She was a quiet, unassuming data analyst, the kind of person who preferred spreadsheets to small talk. No one would have ever pegged her as a hero, but on this particular Tuesday, chaos erupted. Without warning, a security breach plunged the entire building into lockdown. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and panicked shouts echoed through the halls. A group of masked intruders had taken control, and Clara, along with a dozen of her colleagues, found themselves trapped in the main conference room. The intruders were aggressive and unpredictable. They barked orders, their voices filled with menace. People were crying, others were frozen in fear. The air was thick with terror. It was the perfect storm for panic. And that's exactly what the intruders were counting on. They wanted chaos. They wanted to control a room full of terrified, compliant hostages. They looked at Clara, expecting to see the same fear in her eyes. But they saw something else entirely. Something they didn't understand. Something that made them uneasy. Instead of panicking, Clara's mind went quiet. The blaring alarms faded into the background. The shouting became white noise. It was as if a switch had been flipped. All the years she'd spent finding patterns in complex datasets, all the hours dedicated to logical problem-solving suddenly kicked in. Her brain wasn't processing fear. It was processing information. She started to calculate. She noted the number of intruders. She observed their positions in the room, their communication patterns, the types of weapons they carried. She even timed the intervals between their patrols outside the door. Her mind was building a model, a living, breathing spreadsheet of the entire situation. While her colleagues saw only danger, Clara saw variables. She saw probabilities. The lead intruder had a slight limp. One of the others seemed nervous, constantly checking his watch. These weren't just random details, they were data points. Weaknesses. Her heart was still beating fast, but it wasn't from fear. It was the thrill of the calculation, the focus of a mind completely absorbed in a problem. She began to subtly communicate with the person next to her using non-verbal cues she'd learned in a company emergency preparedness seminar years ago, a seminar most people had slept through. A slight tap of the finger, a specific glance. She was relaying information, creating a network of awareness right under the noses of their captors. The intruders wanted to break their spirits to make them feel helpless. But they had made a critical miscalculation. They had underestimated the quiet woman in the corner. They thought she would panic, but instead she was running an algorithm of survival. Her calm demeanor began to have a ripple effect. Seeing her composure, a few others started to breathe a little easier, their own panic subsiding just enough to think. They didn't know what she was planning, but her stillness gave them a sliver of hope. The standoff stretched for hours. The authorities were outside, but a direct assault was too risky. The key to a peaceful resolution had to come from within. And that's when Clara's moment came. She noticed a pattern. Every 22 minutes, the nervous intruder would step out to communicate with his team, leaving a blind spot near the emergency exit for exactly 45 seconds. It was a tiny window of opportunity, but for a calculator like Clara, it was everything. Using a series of discrete hand signals, she communicated the plan to two colleagues she had identified as the most composed. It was a huge risk, but her calculations showed a 70% chance of success. It was the best odds they were going to get. When the moment arrived, it was like clockwork. The nervous intruder stepped out. Clara gave the signal. The three of them moved with a speed and silence that shocked everyone, including the remaining intruders. They unlocked the emergency exit and created a path for everyone else to escape. The sudden coordinated action threw the intruders into confusion, buying precious seconds for the hostages to flee. In the end, everyone got out safely. When the authorities finally stormed the room, they found the intruders disoriented and struggling to understand what had just happened. They were looking for a hero in a cape. What they found was a data analyst who had treated a hostage crisis like the world's most complex logic puzzle. They thought she would panic. They thought her fear would make her weak. But they were wrong, she calculated. And in doing so, she reminded us all that sometimes the most powerful weapon we have is a clear, calm, and calculating mind. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as incredible as I did, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. See you in the next one.